Welcome back everyone to Game 2 of the Carlsen Caruana World Chess Championship match. In Game 1, Carlsen with the black pieces managed to surprise Caruana right from the start by playing the Sicilian defense. He managed to get quite a nice position and had pretty good winning chances in the middle game, but unfortunately Carlsen failed to convert that game. Today he has the white pieces against Caruana, so let's see if Carlsen is able to conjure up something. So Carlsen opens with d4 and we have knight f6 from Caruana. And we soon transpose into a queen's gambit decline position. So here Carlsen plays bishop f4, which is one of the main lines. Black castles, e3, and c5 here from Caruana. We have d takes c5, bishop takes c5, queen to c2, knight c6, and a3 from Carlsen, just preventing knight b4 from black. Caruana here goes queen to a5, trying to take advantage of white's uncastled king, with moves like knight to e4 coming for black, putting more pressure on this pinned knight. So here the idea of going b4 from white to win material doesn't work because black can simply take on b4 with his bishop, and then now this rook is hanging, simply queen takes a1 check. So here Carlsen plays rook to d1, putting more pressure on d5, discouraging black from going knight to e4 because then white can simply take on d5, and then he can take on d5 again with his rook, which puts the bishop in a bit of an awkward pin. Also, this knight is now undefended. So if black goes knight takes c3, white can recapture. Here black can regain his pawn, but if he takes on a3 with the queen, then knight g5 gives white quite a nice initiative. And the immediate queen to a1 check can always be met by a rook coming back to d1. So here after rook to d1, Caruana goes rook to d8, just holding up d5. And this is where Carlsen started to have a long think, taking 16 minutes for his next move. So after quite a while he played bishop to e2. Caruana goes knight to e4, the new novelty in the position. Previously black played a6. So here Carlsen castles, we have knight takes c3, and then Caruana plays h6, just stopping white from going knight to g5. And now we reach a critical moment in the position. So Carlsen has a few options here. He can capture on d5, he can bring the knight to d4 with the idea of trying to win the bishop pair. He can also play a4, just safeguarding that pawn. So let's look at the first option, c takes d5. Magnus didn't go for this because after the recapture, this opens up the light square bishop. Makes things a bit easier for black. Looks like black has a weakness of the isolated pawn on d5, but same could be argued for white. He has these weak pawns on a3 and c3. So that's probably why Magnus didn't go for that line. So here I have knight to d4, trying to go knight b3. Here black shouldn't fall for this queen takes a3 because rook to a1 traps the queen. So after knight d4, probably something like bishop takes d4 from black. Then here queen takes c4, just keeping watch over the knight, making it difficult for black to go b6 to develop the bishop. So here Caruana can take on a3. He is up a pawn, but white has the bishop pair. But Carlsen also didn't go for this line. Instead he played a4, which is understandable. He probably didn't want to walk into Fabi's preparation, opening preparation. He was very prepared this game. Fabi wasted almost no time in the opening. So here knight to e7 from Caruana, just preparing to recapture on d5 with the knight. Carlsen goes knight e5. Bishop d6, challenging that strong knight. Carlsen takes on d5. And here Carlsen has a very interesting move to consider. knight takes f7. So after king takes, white can go bishop h5, king g8. Here he can take on d6, and this puts the rook in an awkward pin. After c4, things become very complicated, depending on what black plays. If black wants to end things quickly, he can play rook to c6. So this unpins. Also, white cannot take the knight because then rook takes c2. So white goes queen to g6, and now knight to f6. Here black is up a piece, so white has to settle for perpetual with queen f7 and queen to g6. So black can try queen to c7 here. So again, white cannot take on d5 because then queen takes c2. So white plays queen g6 after knight f6. Rook takes, queen f7 check, and then here rook to d1. So the black queen has to keep watch of the d8 square, so queen to b6. And this looks like a very complicated position. So understandably, Carlsen didn't go for this because it's just not in his style. Instead, he plays bishop f3, allowing Caruana to simplify the position after knight takes f4. So here Caruana again takes on e5. Carlsen plays rook to d8 check, queen takes, f takes e5, and queen to c7 from Caruana, a good square for the queen in this position, looking at both these weak pawns. Rook b1 from Carlsen, just putting more pressure on b7, making it a bit difficult for Caruana to develop. So Caruana plays rook to b8, just getting out of this awkward pin, and queen to d3 from Magnus. Bishop d7, just keeping things safe and solid. So Caruana could consider taking on e5, but he didn't go for this because white gets some activity after queen d8 check, and then queen to e7. Just looking at this pawn, also pressuring the pawn on b7. So black has to be careful here because don't play queen to f6, this loses instantly after bishop e4 check. And black has to give up the queen with queen to f5, because if king g8, this queen to f8 is checkmate. So Caruana plays bishop d7, keeping things very solid. a5 from Carlsen. So instead of playing a5, Carlsen could consider playing queen to d4. Seems like a decent move, just improving the position of the queen, defending all the pawns. Also, black cannot go rook to d8 because white has rook takes b7. But Carlsen plays a5. So these pawns cannot be taken for the moment because white has queen takes d7. But after bishop c6, white's pawns start to look a bit shaky. Carlsen goes queen to d6. So that is exchanged. Then Caruana takes on f3, destroying white's structure. And then king to f8, gotta bring the king into the game. Otherwise, white goes d7 and rook takes b7. c4 from Carlsen, so maybe trying to support this pawn on d6. King to e8, and here a6 from Carlsen. Probably not the best move. Instead, he should have played maybe c5, then king d7, but Carlsen probably worried that this king could get too active, coming to d5. Maybe he was even worried that after rook c8, looks like black can just take this pawn. But here white has a6, and then if the pawn is taken, then d7. And now white wins. He's going to play c7 on the next move and promote the pawn. So after a6, here black has to go king to c6. So if that's taken, well, this should be a draw with accurate play from both sides. But now Carlsen can bring his king into the game. So here, instead of c5, Carlsen plays a6. So not a bad move, but probably not the best move in the position. Caruana plays b6, and now this pawn on d6 is starting to look a bit weak. Carlsen tries c5 to defend this pawn, also taking advantage of the fact that this pawn on b6 is pinned. King d7, c takes b6. So the consequence of the move a6 is that now Carlsen is most likely going to be down a pawn. After rook takes b6, rook takes a7, this pawn is weak. Here Caruana has the better pawn structure. Magnus's pawns on the king side are shattered, but this still should be a draw for white. King g2. So both players play on for a while. f5 from Caruana, so he is in no rush to regain this pawn. Rook back to b6 defending, king to e6, d7 check, so Carlsen gives up the pawn. Rook to b5, attacking the pawn on e5. So here Magnus could have played f4 to try and make drawing easier, because after e takes f4, king f3, intending to gobble up these pawns. If black goes rook to a2, white always has rook g7 or rook to g6, attacking pawn on g7. But okay, he plays rook to b5. Caruana plays king to e6 to defend the pawn, rook back to b6, king f7, so Caruana slowly trying to make progress, hinching his king closer to white's territory. Rook b5, king to f4 here, defending, but the king has come all the way to f4. But with accurate play, this should still be a draw for white. So another interesting possibility here to consider is rook to e7. So here if rook to b4, then black goes f4, trying to fix the structure. But this is still draw with precise play from Carlsen. So after king to f4, rook to b4 check, here e4, f takes, and then h3 from Carlsen. Rook to a5, rook b7, rook g5 check, king f1, rook to g6, rook b4. So Carlsen is constantly keeping eye over these two pawns on e4 and g7. So quite difficult for black to make progress now. And we have a draw by, I believe, threefold repetition. Black finds it difficult to make any more progress. So after 2 games, the score is even at 1-all. Tomorrow is a rest day, so that should allow Carlsen and Caruana to recharge their energy, and hopefully we will see another exciting game in round 3. As usual, if you enjoyed the content, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.